Hello and welcome to the inaugural Conventus Law News programme. I'm Shazad Westwood and the date today is the 11th of October 2012. Joining me today are my special guests Robert Pay and Stuart Witchell. Robert is a partner and the head of the Asia Dispute Resolution practice at Orrick, Harrington and Sutcliffe. Robert is also the firm's resident Burma or Myanmar expert, and he has recently spoken at two major conferences in Paris and London on developments concerning Burma. Stuart Witchell is Senior Managing Director of the Asia Pacific Global Risk and Investigations practice at FTI Consulting, a global business consulting firm. Prior to this, Stuart was a diplomat in the British Foreign and Commonwealth Office for 17 years. He also presented with Robert at the two major conferences earlier this year. Thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So the focus of today's programme is Burma or Myanmar. Burma has been a focal point of media attention in 2012. Aung San Suu Kyi's entry into Parliament, the easing of international sanctions, and the government promise of sweeping reforms have sparked global debate. One thing is for sure, Burma wants to rejoin the global economy and they are welcoming foreign investors. The future of investing in Burma looks promising. Many multinational corporations have already stated their intention to invest in Burma, and this seems to be backed up by political will across the globe. It's a real pleasure to have Robert and Stuart here today to share some of their expertise and to talk about doing business in Burma and the legal challenges facing businesses who are seeking to invest there. So I'd like to open the discussion by asking you both about your interest in Burma and why you have such an interest in Burma. So Robert first.
Sure, so the answer's pretty simple for me. My father is from Burma originally, and he left in 1962, shortly before the military coup. And sadly for him, that meant he could not return for over 30 years because of the situation in the country. I was the first to go back from overseas, and I visited Burma in 1991 and met with the family there who I'd never known as I was growing up. And I really fell in love with the country. It's a beautiful place, very, very varied, a strong Buddhist culture, which for an outsider is interesting to observe. And the people are just tremendously warm and hospitable.
And Stuart, your reasons?
Apart from Burma being a fabulous country, as Robert has alluded to, there are still a number of challenges for investors. And over the last 12 years, in the consulting field, I've been helping clients try to mitigate some of the potential risks before they enter a market like Myanmar. So hence our current interest in the country.
All right, so we're going to first look at the business aspects and then think about the legal challenges facing businesses. So if I come to Stuart first, what do you see as the immediate opportunities for companies seeking to enter Burma?
There's a number of opportunities. Aside from the exploratory areas in oil and gas, Burma has a massive agricultural sector, which probably hasn't really been tapped into yet. Massive manufacturer of rice, an exporter of rice, particularly to Thailand. There's opportunities with an untapped workforce, where salaries are much lower in Burma than neighbouring countries, China, India, for example. So a lot of clients are potentially looking at moving manufacturing operations from China and other neighbouring countries to potentially Myanmar. Opportunities there. There's also an untapped consumer market, 60 million population in Myanmar, probably only a fraction of which could afford Western products at this time. However, those Western companies now are looking to enter the market, develop their brand name, and then in the future make some profit. So clearly many opportunities in that sector.
So given that there are so many opportunities in Burma, would you say that there are some underlying challenges for investors?
Unfortunately, there are a large number of challenges, and Robert obviously will cover the legal challenges, but from the more obvious ones, there's clearly still political issues. There is an election that will take place in 2015, the outcome of which some predict at the moment, But what the implications of that outcome are uncertain at this stage. So we need to monitor carefully the political situation in the country. Other challenges, corruption is huge, unfortunately, as in other countries in Southeast Asia. But Myanmar ranks fairly low down compared to other countries, and it's fairly endemic. So I think it's got a long way before it cleans up its act. So an investor going there needs to be aware of the potential for corruption. There are also structural limitations to the country in terms of pure infrastructure, as well as basic things like electricity supply. Recently, when I left the country at the airport, the power supply went off, which is rather worrying. So, but from a manufacturing firm perspective, it's actually quite difficult and expensive to have backups, electricity backup supplies, etc. So a number of more basic challenges as well.
So are there any key steps that investors can take or that you would recommend to them before entering this market?
Certainly. There's obviously, as I mentioned earlier, the political issues. So to monitor the political landscape is going to be very important going forward, and to ensure that you get up-to-date key information as it relates to your specific business. That's quite important. And then understanding the market. If you're a firm involved in consumer goods, really understanding the demand for your particular products. There hasn't been a market survey conducted properly for any product, I think, in Myanmar for the last few decades. So again, look at those. Are there real opportunities? There's a question mark there. And then I think looking and trying to find suitable business partners, very, very important. We've seen many problems in Southeast Asia, China, etc., where companies haven't perhaps found the right partner, or they've invested rather naively or rather too quickly. So again, choose your right partner, understand their track record, understand their connections, and whether those connections are suitable for your operation and ethical as well.
That's great. Thanks very much for your input. So thinking now about the legal challenges facing businesses, Robert, you recently wrote an article for the Wall Street Journal in which you quoted Aung San Suu Kyi, who recently said, "Would-be investors, please be warned, even the best investment law would be of no use if there were no courts independent and clean enough to administer those laws justly." So could you first of all give us a brief overview of the courts and legal system in Burma?
Sure. So, Burma has a common law legal system based very closely on the English system. And if you went back 50, 60 years in time, the quality of the courts was extremely high. And in fact, I have the Burma Law Reports 1953 in my office. And if you read them, they're not too different to the All England reports. Sadly, during the military rule from 62 onwards, the courts have declined dramatically. And as Stuart has alluded to, corruption has been fairly rife. And there are real concerns if you're a foreign investor going to court in Burma. Now, one of the areas for development and one of the easy solutions to this will be to have international arbitration of commercial disputes outside the country. And that's a topic I've had the opportunity to discuss with both the Attorney General and the Minister for Industry in Burma, both of whom understand the importance of allowing international arbitration, and particularly for Burma to sign up to the New York Convention on the recognition of foreign arbitral awards. So I'm hopeful that they will do that, and that at least in the short to medium term, there won't need to be such a heavy dependence on the local courts. Although, of course, any foreign arbitral award will still have to be brought to the country for enforcement, and it will be crucial to train Burmese judges on dealing with New York Convention awards. And that's something I'm in an ongoing dialogue hoping to assist with.
So in terms of the reforms that you're suggesting, so training judges and implementing international arbitration, Are those reforms and the regulations, are they practical, or are they business friendly, would you say?
So if you're talking about the current sort of foreign investment laws and the legal landscape generally, there are a lot of old laws that are, as I said, closely based on the English laws. So, for example, the Company Act dates back to the early 20th century, and the Arbitration Act is from 1944. There's also a more recent foreign investment law that was enacted in 1988, and I would say the key with all of the laws is they're outdated, but they're not that bad in terms of black letter law. The issues are not so much with the written laws, but how they're implemented.
So having touched on the legal landscape in Burma, what do you feel are the legal challenges multinational corporations should be aware of under the current regulations?
So under the current foreign investment law, there are tremendous limits on issues such as ability to own real estate. So most foreign companies cannot own real estate in Burma, and that's a big issue when real estate prices have been going up so dramatically. There are also limits on how long you can lease real estate for. And other than for the really big investors, most foreign investors can only take leases for a year. And that's very unhelpful in a market. The prices are going up constantly, and new potential tenants coming in. There are issues around employment. At the moment, the written employment laws are, I think, reasonable, but the way they've been implemented in practice has not always been. There have been quite a few illegal strikes, and nothing has been done about those. And there's a host of other issues, but one of the really sort of practical points is to get anything done in Burma these days, you do need to go to the capital, Naypyidaw, and that's a 5-6 hour drive away from Yangon, the main sort of business city. And you have to go up to Naypyidaw and meet with a relatively senior civil servant to get anything done, and that's tremendously inconvenient, and it slows everything down. A lot of the sort of mid-level and junior civil servants are not sure what they're allowed to approve and what they're not allowed to approve, and so that's become a real stumbling block.
So Stuart has already touched on some of the challenges facing businesses and how these can be mitigated. Can I ask, Robert, how can some of the challenges you've touched on be mitigated?
So, one of the key issues, and Stuart touched on this, is finding a good joint venture partner, local partner. Now, that takes time. You can't rush it. You need to be very careful. And there's a very basic stumbling block there at the moment, in that US sanctions still prohibit, they still have a blacklist of certain local companies and individuals that US companies are not allowed to do business with. So the first thing you have to do is go through the blacklist and check that your potential partner is not either on the blacklist or somehow associated with somebody who is on it. All of that takes time, obviously, but it is crucial.
Is there anything that you'd like to add, Stuart?
As Robert said, I think as it regards finding a good business partner, really, clearly Chinese firms, Thai firms, Indian firms, Korean firms have already penetrated the market, and they've already established themselves there. They've established business partners and joint ventures. So it's not such an open market. There is a lot of competition already, actually. So I think understanding the competitive landscape, as well as not only the political landscape and all the other associated issues, I think is going to be important for potential investors.
So both of you seem fairly positive about the future of Burma, but could you just sum up briefly how confident you are of Burma's position in the global economy going into the future?
Sure. So I think certainly in the long term, I feel very confident. Stuart alluded to the fact that in 2015 there will potentially be a switchover of power. I think nobody's certain how that's going to pan out, and that will provide a little bit of uncertainty in the near term. And I know that some multinationals are actually a little bit nervous about the National League for Democracy coming to power because they haven't necessarily been trained for that. Having said that, the National League for Democracy is working hard to train up members of the party and the MPs, and I hope and believe, and actually I feel pretty confident that the positive steps we've seen are going to continue. But it's not going to be an easy place for a foreign investor to come into in the short term. But in the longer term, I feel very confident.
And Stuart?
Likewise, I think the reform process is definitely on the right path, and I think it's going to continue along that path. 2015 is clearly a key date which many investors are, as Robert alluded to, are perhaps waiting to see what happens after those elections as to whether they go forward with their investments. However, there are many others who don't want to miss the boat, so they don't want to wait till 2015 because they believe that everybody else will be there before them, and they may miss on opportunities. But I certainly think the government is committed to these reforms. Whether there is a change of government and the reform process will slow down, I don't know. But I certainly think at the moment the long-term future of the country is quite positive.
It's really, really fantastic to hear you both speaking so positively about Burma. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. Thank you both very much for joining me and sharing your expertise. If you have any questions for either Robert Pei or Stuart Witchell, please email us at editor@conventuslaw.com. Thank you very much for watching today, and we look forward to you joining us at the next Conventus Law News programme. Goodbye.